Hi everyone! Today we're going to be covering some basics of makeup. I've been asked a few times over the years to cover very small things about makeup and how I do them. And the number one question I get asked is, how do you put your eyeshadow on? And honestly, I don't think I do anything especially unique in terms of eyeshadow application, but people are interested, so I thought I would show you. For reference, I have what is considered hooded eyelids. And hooded eyelids are basically when you look straight forward, you cannot see that person's lid. Now, yes, you can see it when they blink or when they're talking and stuff like that, but just straight on or when they smile, there's no visible lid. So it can be a bit more of a challenge for people to apply eyeshadow who have hooded lids, because it means that you can't see as much eyeshadow as somebody else who has a visible lid. Now, when we say hooded, we're referring to this section up here, which sort of lays down on top of your actual lid. Some people have very hooded lids where it looks like quite a crease hanging over top of the eye, and other people have, you know, a more straightforward lid where this section is quite fatty, but it's not drooping. Now, of course, the older you get, the more droopier your skin will be. It's just the facts of life. So the older we get, the more that this section starts to fall down more on top of our lid. Let's get into how I apply my eyeshadow. Now that we're up close and personal, you can see what my eyes look like. If I look straight on at you without blinking, I have very hooded lids. Of course, for eyeshadow application, this can be a little bit difficult because it means that your lids aren't ever really showing unless you blink. In general, this means that personally for me, I prefer to bring my eyeshadow a lot higher so that you can see it when my eyes are open. The most crucial and important step I can ever teach you about eyeshadows is that you need to add a transition shade. Now, this color is placed right through the crease, edging up towards the brow bone. And the purpose of this shade is to make the edge of your eyeshadow color look a little bit more seamless. If you're using a dark color and it just goes straight from your crease color to your brow bone shade, it's gonna look a little bit too stark. So what you're looking for in a transition shade is a color that's a few levels deeper than your actual skin tone and will help deepen up this area. The first thing I start out with, no matter what look I am doing, is going for a medium warm shade and putting that through my crease. And I'm going to be using the Kat Von D Shade and Light eye palette just because it's all matte and it's going to be easier to see the tones as we go on. So to start out, I use a relatively big brush. This is the Real Techniques domed shadow brush, and I'm going to dip into that color. You can knock off the excess if you want, but I do my eyeshadow first and then apply my foundation afterwards so I can just clean up without having to worry about disrupting my foundation. So once I've dipped into the shadow, I'm going to be taking that brush and placing the product where my crease is approximately. Now, my socket is, also called the crease, right about there, but it's very hard to see because I just don't have much of a socket that's visible. So I need to create a socket line, sort of. I'm not going to be doing a cut crease, but I need to create a little bit of a shadow there with my transition shade. So this color goes straight through that supposed socket line. So I use windshield wiper motions to place this color down. It is not a precise movement, it is just back and forth to create a shadow. So as you'll notice, I'm bringing this quite high and it's almost touching my brow bone, but it's not quite there yet. Again, I'm bringing this very high because when I look forward, you can't see my lid and I need this color to be peeking above that section of my crease. I'll go in with my lid color next, and for this I'm gonna keep it pretty basic and use just one of the really pale white shades. To apply my lid shade, I always use a flat shader brush. This is the MAC 239. It is so old, all of the writing has been worn off on this one, but this is the only brush I use for my lid shade. Because it's short and flat, it can pick up a lot of product and deposit that really evenly on the lid. So I'm just going to lay that down on top of my lid. And I tend to carve out this area just so that I'm placing it exactly where I want it. I'll usually layer a few layers to get it completely opaque. And I also bring that up to my crease, but not above it. I do not want to be covering that transition shade. When I'm doing this, I also don't care too much about how messy I make this because I'm going to be putting another shade on the outer edge. I only care about making the inside corner look relatively smooth. So now that I have the crease shade and the lid color down, I want to start adding some dimension here. Because I don't have much of a crease, I want to create one. I want to create depth and dimension where it doesn't exist. And the way to do that is to add shadow that is darker. So we originally used this pale orange shade for the crease. Now I want to use something a little bit deeper. So I'm going to go in with this orange shade right here. And I'm going to be using the MAC 217 brush. This is not as big as the previous transition brush. So this one is fatter and it's better at depositing color in a wider area. This one is more targeted. So I'm going to tap into my shadow with the tip of the brush, and then I'm going to go right into that socket line and go back and forth. Depending on the shadow, not all back and forth movement works. Sometimes I will pat it and that places it just a little bit better for me. This extra step is adding a little bit more dimension and it's creating a softer transition up to your brow bone. Adding depth and dimension to a crease shade is the best tip I can ever give to any newcomer to makeup. This adds so much dimension to your look. All right, so now that I'm looking straight on, you can see that you can't see much of my lid shade unless I blink, but you are seeing a haze of color rising up to my brow bone, but it looks smooth enough because I've already added in a few colors to make it gradually change to my brow bone. It's not like a stark color that just really hits you in the face. All right, so to finish this up, I want to add one more color in the outer corner to tie it all together. And I usually go for a darker color at this point. So we've been sticking with this area. So I'm just going to go with this deeper shade here. I'm still using my MAC 217 brush and I'm tapping into that shadow. And then I'm going to condense it to what they call the outer V area. I often call it the outer corner, but it's just this little place right here that is just on the very edge of your socket. And I just tap this in and bring it up and then down. If you find that you're not getting a smooth blend between the lid and the outer corner shade, just go back in with your lid shade and sort of brush gently over it until you get the gradient that you're looking for. All right, the last stage is to add a brow bone highlight color, and I usually go for matte shades just because that's what I prefer. And I tend to pick something that's the same color as my skin tone or a shade lighter. I've been using the MAC 275 brush to do this for years. I don't think it's like the best brush to do it with, but I've just been doing it for so long that I just stick with what I know. So I'm tapping into the product and then I'm just going to start at the under arch of my brow and then drag it back and forth. And this will also help blend more of that transition shade upwards and give you an even softer gradient. All right, so because I do my eyeshadow first, I now have the luxury of being able to clean up my face, and without fail, every morning I will pump into my Bioderma with a cotton pad and then just sweep the excess away. So to finish up the eyes, obviously just pop on your mascara, and for me, I would apply my face after I've done my eyes. And there you have it. That's exactly how I apply my eyeshadow. I do not really change this technique no matter what colors I am using. I do the same thing every single day. Sometimes I use a few less colors, but in general, I'm pretty much looking at a transition shade, a lid shade, and then an outer corner shade. I don't always add in that extra crease shade, but it does look better. Although it's an extra step to do, so not everybody has time for that. Oh yes, and of course, I always do add that brow bone highlight shade. That is important for me, especially considering I'm bringing that transition shade so high. In general, people do say that using matte shades will make hooded lids not so stark. I don't really feel one way or the other on it. I really enjoy matte shadows, but I am not opposed to putting a shiny crease shade in. It's all about personal preference. I hope you found this video helpful, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!